Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're really looking forward to chatting around how to not get lost in the world of AI search, a brave new world for all of us. I'm Claire Wilson. I'll be presenting half of the session today, and I'm head of content and strategy at Stratton Craig. And I'm joined by Colm, one of our writers. I lead the team of writers here, but I've also got a background as an investment writer and in a range of corporate communications and marketing roles. But I've been at Stratton Craig for 9 years now, and I'm joined by Colm, who's our writing and AI lead. So I guess he's the subject matter expert here this morning, and I'm the backup singer. But Colm, I'll hand over to you for an introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. As Claire said, I'm writing lead at Stratton Craig. I've been here, I think, 8 years. Yeah, background in sort of technology, B2B, copywriting and content creation. And for the last, 3 or 4 years, I've also been the AI lead at Stratton Craig. So as well as sort of introducing tools, training the team, kind of, looking at how we can integrate AI into our workflows and use it in a way that benefits our clients. I guess I've also been, grappling with the philosophical question of what it actually means to be a content agency in the world of AI. And the topic that we're going to be getting into today is definitely a key thing, a key part of that conundrum. So let's get right into it then, Claire.
Thanks, Colm. So for those of you not familiar with Stratton Craig, we're a corporate communications and content agency. We work with all kinds of clients and help them communicate really complex messages to broad audiences, I would say is our specialty. We've been in the biz since 1987. So as you can imagine, the kinds of writing we do have changed really considerably over that time. But what hasn't changed is that our belief that you don't have to dumb something down to make it better understood. So with a focus on clarity, even the most complex messages can be transformed into engaging content. We do all kinds of writing and strategy, but it's broadly split across 4 categories. But the key thing I like to explain when you look at this broad list of services is that we understand that the person who writes your annual report is not going to be the person that writes your eye-catching, saucy social post. So we've got a team of fantastic in-house writers. Colm is one of them. I guess I would say that. And then we have real specialism in areas like sustainability, tech, finance, content strategy. But we also have a really wide network of trusted freelancers that we can draw on for specialist sector or format knowledge as needed. And we think that that's really important in terms of getting the right result for our clients. Since 2023, we've been part of the Positive Change Group. I won't read all of this slide, but the overview is that we're a group of like-minded agencies that share the belief that better communications can build better relationships with stakeholders, and better relationships build better businesses. So that is the boring intro bits over. Today, what we're going to cover off is SEO versus GEO, so generative engine optimization and how search has shifted as a result of that. We're going to talk a little bit about what AI is looking for and how to sort of make sure that you're visible in that world. And we're going to share a little framework we're calling the visibility framework, and it's really about how to keep your content discoverable, some core rules and best practice that you can follow to make sure that your content is found by the people you want it to. And then we're going to round off with a section about how content strategy is really important now in a world where I guess competing for attention has become even more competitive somehow. We thought it could never happen. So I'm going to hand over to Colm, who's going to lead us through this next section.
Great, thank you, Claire. So search behavior is fundamentally changing, and GEO, sorry, slash AI search, and we will probably be using those terms interchangeably throughout this webinar, so apologies for that. But it is one of the most immediate changes that's been brought about by AI. Other things like agents or RAG or those kind of things, they do need to be addressed by businesses, but the timeframes for those are much more flexible, and then it depends really clearly on the makeup of your team and your technical skills and all that kind of stuff. But GEO slash AI search is something that many businesses need to be addressing today, as it has had a pretty interesting and almost immediate effect on the world of website and content visibility. So people are no longer people essentially the big change here is that people no longer need to actually visit a website to get the information they need. AI tools and AI summaries are increasingly just answering questions for them directly. And what this means for brands is that you can now be judged before anyone actually lands on your sites or takes a look at your case studies or your services page. And it's all based on how AI is interpreting and presenting your expertise. So the point here is that SEO is not dead. It's certainly not dead. It's just that visibility is working a little bit differently now and is, in a real period of change. So your website is no longer just a destination for human visitors. It's also now source material for AI. And while your content still needs to do the same fundamental job it's always done, it needs to inform people, it needs to persuade people, it needs to build trust with your stakeholders, and it needs to support their decision making. But now it also needs to be understood and surfaced by AI systems. And as I said earlier, a lot of cases, the user isn't actually ever going to get to the original source material now. So this means that your content now has two audiences. You're now writing content for humans who are looking for relevance, credibility, insight, and clarity. But you're also now looking to appeal to AI systems that prioritize consistency, structure, and verifiability. I was worried if I was going to be able to say that word, but I have, so things are going well. And this isn't just, this isn't a prediction about the way things are going. This is something that's actually happening right now. These stats are evidence that this matters commercially for brands in a big way. More people are starting searches with AI, and more searches are ending without a click. So that's a really sort of key change here is that, people are getting the information they need about bakeries in their city or content agencies, and they're not really even going through and looking at that brand's website. AI is beginning to influence which brands people trust. That's another big shift and one with potentially huge implications for the way that brands talk about themselves and market themselves. And I think we've all, gotten used to Google AI overviews pretty quick. I know a lot of, opinion about them was pretty strong when they came out, but I would imagine that all of us have typed a simple query into Google, been satisfied with the summary, and then gone about our day. Whereas before, yeah, you might have actually clicked through to that website or maybe the top three just to have a look. There's an increasing sort of section of those searches that aren't actually resulting in clicks anymore. So this creates an interesting situation for businesses, especially those that have historically measured success only on website traffic. You might still be visible somewhere in the search journey, but you might not actually be benefit from it in the way that you used to. And the question becomes, is your brand actually being accurately represented by AI when it gives an answer? Is it pulling the right information? Is it presenting your brand in the way that you would want it to, that aligns with your key messaging and your tone of voice? And so really visibility now increasingly depends on whether you offer a point of view that is worth paying attention to. And this is especially true in the age of AI slop. Whether it's on LinkedIn or Medium or wherever it is, we're increasingly seeing, just everyone has the ability to create content now, but a large portion of that content is kind of very samey and generic. But the big key mindset shift that businesses really need to get a hold of here is that AI is really a new stakeholder for businesses, and you need to be adapting your communications as such. So AI systems, they're not just simply retrieving information, they're actually interpreting it, they're comparing it against other sources, and they're presenting it in a way that shapes the way that a user will understand your business. And this really means that they have a huge influence on how your brand is potentially perceived. And so brands really need to be thinking about AI as a stakeholder in the same way as your customers, your investors, your regulators, or your employees. Now we're probably all already adapting our messaging in the way we communicate to different audiences, but now we need to do it with AI. The difference being is that it's not really adapting the tone or adapting the messaging. It's really about communicating within the logic of how AI systems assess trust and relevance. Now, I just want to say that this doesn't mean writing robotic content. It means making content that's clear enough for AI to interpret, but also keeps the nuance and credibility that humans need. And again, coming back to that idea of AI slop and proliferation of generic content across the internet, AI search actually increases the need for messaging discipline. If your story is inconsistent across channels, AI has more room to misinterpret it. So this table has a quick breakdown of the distinction between SEO and GEO. I imagine a lot of you probably already know this, so I won't spend too long on this. But you know, the high level definition distinction here is that SEO is mainly about helping pages rank on a search engine, whereas GEO is about helping information be selected, interpreted, and included in an AI generated answer. So while these things do overlap, and a lot of the things that are important for SEO are also important for GEO, there is a big distinction between the two of them. And the big difference is that traditional search would give the user a list of links, while AI search generates one answer, one single source of inverted commas truth. And so this changes the nature of website visibility and content visibility. The question is no longer, are we ranking? Are we visible to people on search engines? The question becomes, what does AI actually understand about us? And again, understand is probably the wrong term there. AI is not actually doing any thinking. But what is AI, how is AI interpreting the information that we put out there? And what sources is it using to form that understanding? And how AI works is also an important thing to sort of get your head around. Again, going into the full technical deep dive of how it does it is probably beyond the scope of this webinar. So I'm just going to give you a simple overview here. So the user will ask a question, and the system immediately tries to work out what the person is really asking. It looks for key topics, it looks for subtopics, it looks to, resolve any inconsistencies in the language. It translates the user's often messy prompt or informal prompt into a clearer system prompt that it can use. It will then either go into the website. It will either go onto the web to find websites, or go through an approved knowledge base to find the answers. It's looking for key topics and keywords related to those topics. It then compares different sources, but it's really looking to compare sources on how useful they're going to be to the reader, and importantly, the credibility of the source. A key challenge in the world of SEO search is that, a small agency and is going to have trouble, competing against McKinsey. Now, that was always the case. But if the small agency can come up with original point of view backed by data, then AI might surface them as well. So the AI then synthesizes the information, it looks for patterns and decides what's most useful to the user, and it then produces a direct response. And often, as we said earlier, the user is satisfied with that and doesn't actually need to click through to the other sources. But having said that, as a content agency, we do think that GEO is good for content. It's definitely an interesting challenge. But the reason we say that is that AI search really does make your content matter more than ever. In the world of pure SEO, there are some technical shortcuts and tricks that would allow a brand to rank highly, even if their content was not that useful and was actually quite generic. AI search, on the other hand, it really does seem to prioritize brands that can clearly think about their value and engage storytelling and drive original insight with consistent communication. Now, obviously, strong technical SEO really does still matter, but you cannot compensate for weak or generic or inconsistent content anymore. AI search does not remove the need for technical optimization, but it does really raise the standard of the content itself. And, it does highlight this problem of, it's almost a paradox of generic content in the world of AI. So with traditional SEO, as I said, your content could be average. It could say the same thing as pretty much everyone else, but it could still rank highly. in an AI-driven world, content that lacks clarity, structure, or originality is probably going to be overlooked by AI, as well as being dismissed by humans. The paradox here is that with more and more people using AI to create content, the content that's being created is exactly the kind of generic, samey content that is actually going to be skipped over by AI itself when it's looking to give an answer to users. So absolutely, the world of AI search is one that prioritizes human-led content, human-driven insight, and originality and creativity. So, in that way, it's a challenge, but we think it's ultimately a good thing for the world of content because AI search ultimately rewards content that, explains ideas clearly, shares unique information, data, and insight, provides enough context to stand alone. Claire will sort of get into why that is important in a second, and also builds a consistent narrative across different channels. And the commercial implications of this are basically that it's not about just focusing on producing more content anymore. It's really about producing content that earns trust and credibility. AI search is really a long-term visibility strategy. It's not a quick fix. And importantly, you're not trying to trick AI systems. You're really trying to just make your expertise as clear, consistent, and easy to verify as possible. So, well, hello, handsome. That is a picture of me, and it's also a quote of me, but I am not narcissistic enough to read you aloud my own quote, but I will just rest assured that it's probably says everything that I've just said in a much more concise and efficient way. Okay, let's get into what brands actually need to do then. So the visibility framework that we pulled together is all about helping brands put the right stable foundations in place. So understanding AI visibility, how AI visibility is sort of changing is the starting point, but the real challenge is applying principles and changes to your processes and workflows that improve your content effectiveness, not just your discoverability. So these principles will give you, as I said, some stable foundations, even as the AI tools keep changing. We know the pace of innovation is absolutely ridiculous right now. That's why getting the right foundations in place is absolutely critical. And they focus on allowing you to clearly express yourself, consistently express your expertise, and create content that can stand alone when reused or summarized. So let's get into it. There are 6 principles. These are the first 3. The first one is be consistent. So the main point here is that consistency helps people and AI recognize, verify, and trust your content. Now, this is not just about your tone of voice, but you need to make sure that your messaging, your proof points, and your terminology, as well as your storytelling, really align across channels. You know, there are many examples of brands whose websites say one thing, whose LinkedIn posts say another thing. Sales deck uses different terminology, and then when the leadership are making statements, they're also talking about products and services in a different way. Now, human readers can probably, deal with that inconsistency. But with AI, that really can dilute your authority and make sure and it can result in AI really struggling to work out which version of your many truths it wants to use. And it might just skip over you in favor of a source that offers a bit more authority and credibility. So, you need to be developing clear messaging houses, a key bank of terminology, a central source of truth that different teams and functions and channels can all pull from, and especially review priority pages and materials so that they align for that. The second one is make sure your originality stands out. So for me, this is the most exciting part of the kind of AI search world, is that repetition is pretty easy to ignore, but especially now in a saturated content market, if you're just repeating wild information that's already widely available, it's less likely to be selected, cited, or remembered. And this really puts the onus on brands to have an original and distinctive point of view. Maybe not original so much, but distinctive, and one that's backed up by data and insight. So what do you know that others don't. Can you use your internal expertise to really shape the conversation around this, or present an interesting point of view? Can you capture proprietary data, and can you turn the questions that your customers are asking you into useful content? So it's not just about asking, should we write about this topic because everyone else is? It's more about saying, what can we actually add to this conversation, and what value can we present that is actually genuinely useful to people? And finally, make the structure explicit. So structure is key for helping both humans and AI. Headings, summaries, lists, tables, all that good stuff. They all help readers scan content, but they also help AI systems identify themes and priorities. So, there's kind of the rules of good content are still applicable here. You want to use headings that say what a section actually covers. You want to start important sections with a clear summary, use FAQs for direct questions, use comparison tables when explaining the differences between things. AI loves a comparison table, and avoid burying the useful answer halfway down the page. So you might want to do a flowery introduction, but it's always best to sort of lay out your stall as early as you can. So structure is not just cosmetic here; it really does affect whether the content can be understood and reused accurately. And Claire, I think getting the structure right is also really important because of the way that AI might be presenting your content out of context, and dicing and slicing the way it talks about you.
Yeah, exactly. Which leads us very nicely to the next part of the visibility framework, and that's around the importance of providing context. So as we've all seen, AI tends to surface snippets of things, or the answer which it feels has best responded to the question that you've asked. So it's really important that you make sure key points can stand alone. If they're lifted out of context, they're not going to be diluted or misinterpreted or misunderstood. And it's just thinking about how AI will extract and summarize that content when you're producing it and publishing it. We've already talked a little bit about like, using structure to ensure clarity, but we can also use clarity, prioritize clarity within the language that we're using. So that means making everything really direct, really accessible, um, that helps people understand every kind of content more quickly and more easily. And even the most complex subjects, whether you're talking to a sophisticated audience or not, using shorter sentences, more direct language will help people understand your messages more quickly. But it also, as we've said, quite a lot of this is best practice writing, best practice content already, but it also works for AI, improves your chance for being a surface in AI. And then finally, a point that we're going to dive into a little bit more in more detail, don't overlook governance. One of the things we're sort of seeing, a lot of the companies where we work with have very mature content programs that are in place for a long time. But it's really important that if you've got a large content program, you've got really clear rules around who owns that content, what are your review processes to make sure that it's on point, on quality, and aligned with your business strategy. But then also, is it being reviewed regularly on an ongoing basis? Do you need to go back to your back catalogue, remove things that are no longer relevant, update things where you might be able to gain more value from them? So it really puts a bit more onus in terms of how you're managing your bank of content. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how content strategy really comes to the fore in this new environment. The principles we shared before give us a foundation, but that doesn't necessarily establish how you're going to apply all of these within a business, to create a kind of a joined up ecosystem to make sure that you're really thinking carefully about what it is you're saying as a business, how you're saying it, and where it should appear to cut through to your audience. And oh, hey, gorgeous. That's Anna standing behind me. So I also have self-respect, so I won't be reading out my quote. But the gist of this here is that I really believe content strategy is primarily about effectiveness. It's thinking carefully about where you should focus your content efforts to meet your audience, whether that's about owning a topic or a space, establishing a really unique perspective. But most importantly, it's also about thinking about how your content aligns with your business strategy to drive your business forward. So I'm going to whiz through the rest of this because we've already talked more than we thought we would. So what makes content effective? Building on the point that Colm made earlier, in a sea of content, you really need to make sure that you're expressing a point of view worth paying attention to. Because winning attention from the people that matter doesn't happen by chance. Well, sometimes it does, but luck isn't a sound strategy for long-term success. And what we really want to see in terms of an effective content program is being able to make that process repeatable. So this list I've summarized here could have been much, much longer, and I'm sure you'll be able to find a million LinkedIn articles that break these down into 500 steps. But I think this is a really good way to take it back to first principles. And a good content strategy helps you nail each of these points. So it's how to make your content relevant, how to make it distinctive, how to make it engaging, and then it establishes a process to make it repeatable, as I've said already, because there's no point publishing content to an audience of none. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean about relevant. So it's no surprise to any of us that we're all competing in an attention economy. We're all exposed to notifications, ads, emails, social feeds, really competing for quite limited mental bandwidth. And in some of our cases, that mental bandwidth seems to be getting smaller by the day. But I'm not going to bag on about attention spans because we all know how it feels to doom scroll, but also how quickly we decide what to linger on or rather not linger on. And strategic content starts with a really strong understanding of what's important to the audience you're trying to reach. What are the pain points you're solving for them? What do they value most about your services? How does this help drive your business strategy? And what we suggest people do to get really focused on those things is you need clear content pillars. So AI is rewarding companies that are recognized authorities on topics, not those that throw out their two pence worth on any and every issue. So it's essential to really choose where you're going to invest your efforts and your energy, and that these are also the things that matter most to your audience. Secondly, a channel strategy. So this is about identifying where your audiences are looking for that information about your topics and how they want to consume it, telling you what formats you need to create and how to distribute your content to make sure it's found by the right people, as well as AI. The next point I want to dive into a little bit is about distinctiveness of content. So we've talked a bit already that AI is prioritizing content that shares unique information, data, or insights because that can really give you an edge. And so here are the ways you can stand out there. So proprietary research data, that might be something that you think, oh, that sounds like too much of an investment. We're not going to be running our own independent surveys, etc. We don't have the resources for that. But there are actually quite a few ways that you can get access to unique data without going to lengths like that. And that can come from, surveys of your contact center and collating customer feedback. So really understanding what's important to them. It can come from anecdotal sales conversations with the people at the front line of your business, or even behavior data you might generate through your own CRM, obviously not violating GDPR, etc. But there are other ways to sort of find unique content and perspectives that could help you here. The other thing we like to talk about is about genuine thought leadership. And this is about really leading a conversation, not following it. And Colm mentioned earlier, it means not writing something just because everybody else in your market has already written something on it. It's about writing something new, forging new ground, sharing new ideas, and whether that's thinking about what's going to come next. So, what are the things people aren't worrying about yet, rather than what other people have already written about extensively? And that final point there is developing an unusual or a novel perspective on an issue. So I'd like to explore this point in a little bit more detail because I really believe that a compelling insight is something that doesn't need to be left to chance. There are certain ingredients that can really make something a compelling topic for content. And what we believe around that is that there's usually a core observation. So it's a fundamental fact about something, a truth about either industry or society or a company. But there's a tension there. There's something that needs to be resolved. There's a blocker. It gives people stress, or people can't necessarily achieve what they need to as a result of that. And you put those together, those two things together, with a strong position on how to resolve that issue. So, what is it that people should do? What's the solution you bring that's differentiated? And all these things, three things, can combine to to create a really compelling angle, which is going to demand that attention that you're really needing to compete for much more vigorously. Next, engaging. So, what do we mean about engaging content? Well, engaging content for us doesn't just inform, it also tells a story. And one of the things that AI isn't able to do as effectively as real people is connecting emotionally with an audience and reflecting real experiences, challenges, because those are the ways in which, when you communicate, you'll get people paying more attention to your content and likely remembering it more as well. So, storytelling is something we're really interested in, and it's really important because it offers a solution that addresses the twin challenges of that lack of trust we're seeing in audiences alongside a lack of attention span. So, stories are how humans have made sense of the world forever. We don't tend to remember facts and figures on their own, but when they're woven into a story, it makes sense of it for us. They become understandable, memorable, and more meaningful. There are all kinds of stats that I could share here, but I think Colm has gone on too long, and I probably don't have as much time on my second half of my presentation, but people are 20 times more likely to remember information when it's in the format of a story. So the stories tell us why something matters and make us care about it. Our brains respond differently to them, and they engage with our emotions, not just rational parts of the brain. And you all might be saying, well, that's fine, but I work in a B2B environment, so people don't need to have feelings when they're making business decisions. But in fact, all decisions need emotions to proceed. Even if you've evaluated the facts carefully, you will still need to feel good or bad about a decision to move forward on it. So we can't really separate emotions from rational thinking. And there was that very well known landmark Binet field research that found the impact of emotional messaging was approximately twice as effective as rational messaging. So, really, this is a way for us to do both, emotional and rational messaging. So, I like to talk about the storytelling imperative in this way. It's about attention. Stories attract and keep more attention. It's about retention of information. They make content and messages more memorable than facts or statistics. And it's about conversion. It increases conversions and helps people make decisions and act. Now, I won't go into too much detail on this one, but one of the things we're really mindful here at Stratton Craig is that a lot of people are talking about storytelling in the market at the moment and why it's important, but it's not always clear what they mean or how to apply it effectively to all different types of writing. We have our own view in terms of a recipe for storytelling, and we've called it Frame. And we'll share these slides afterwards so you can look more closely at what we're talking about here. But it's our model for delivering content effectiveness, assessing the use of storytelling techniques, which we believe can be applied in all content to build trust, belief, and loyalty with your audience. See, I might have gone on too long there in my own part. And then finally, repeatable. So, the really tough thing about all the advice on the pages that we've shared today is that it's not just enough to make one or two great pieces of content. You need to really keep creating that content that is relevant, distinctive, engaging, structured to meet the needs of AI. And you have to do this week in and week out. And this is where some processes and structure are really important to help guide your efforts. So that could be in the form of a really clear tone of voice and style guide. So all your content creators are singing from the same hymn sheet. It could be messaging frameworks, as Colm mentioned earlier. And it just makes sure that you've really crossed your T's and dotted your I's when it comes to grammar and style. It's also something that, in the right format, can be fed into AI to help guide any content, AI-enabled content that you're using. So again, it's really important that you have those rules in place. Um, an editorial process. Now, all of our clients tell us that insight that they get from their subject matter experts is invaluable, but it can be one of the hardest things to extract from a business on a regular basis. People are time poor, or they might be too immersed in their expertise to know what's going to resonate with the broader audience. So that's when we think it's really valuable to have a strong editorial process because it industrializes that extraction of insight from your business. Well, it sounds quite extractive when I say it like that. But really, it's about bringing different perspectives together to make sure that you're talking about the things that matter to your audience, you're getting the insight from the subject matter experts that have it, and then you're translating it in a way that's going to create compelling content. KPIs sounds basic, but this is about figuring out what good looks like for you and therefore whether you're hitting it or not. So, and this may really make sure that your content isn't just attractive wallpaper for your website, but instead is a valuable asset that helps drive your business forward. Obviously, AI analytics are still informative stages and developing, but again, it's probably something that you'll need to add to your digital dashboard in terms of understanding how you're being surfaced for AI, as well as SEO. And then finally, the governance and the rules and processes that wrap around your content program. So, who reviews and approves content before it's published? Who owns content on your website? Do you need to lock down your publishing rights to head off any rogue contributions? We've seen plenty of those. And all these things can really help ensure that your content is on brand and on point, both in terms of topic and quality. And this is really going to become more important than ever in setting you apart in the attention economy. So we have done pretty well there because I can see that we have not run too far over time that we were hoping to. We do have a Q&A function. So if anybody has any questions about what we've discussed so far, we can pop them in here. We'll also be sharing the slides with you all in a follow-up so you can read them all at your leisure. And if you do have any more questions, obviously, we'd be really happy to speak to you about what we've discussed today or about any other ways that we can help support you in terms of your content. I'll just, while we're waiting for any questions to pop up, I will we also, and this is an exciting new offer for us, we also have an opportunity for a free content audit of your website homepage against these principles that we've discussed here today. We've got 3 that we're giving away. So the first people to get in touch with us as a follow-up to this session, we'd be very happy to offer you a free look at your website, see where we think there are opportunities to improve, what's working well, and ways you can incorporate GEO principles to your content strategy as well.